All right, so let's discuss the two articles that we were assigned this week. Uh, I'd like to say they changed the way I think about stress and child development for sure. The first article by Shonkoff and colleagues, it focused on like toxic stress, how early adversity can become biologically embedded. The second article by Clayborne um, examined like parental maternal stress and the role parenting can play influence in later outcomes. So a lot of things stood out to me, but one of them is that both articles they challenged the idea that development is fixed. Instead, they suggest that like biology, environment, and relationships work together to shape developmental outcome. So while I was reading these articles, I kept coming back to the questions about resilience, like early intervention, and whether supportive relationships can help change, I guess, the developmental trajectories. So throughout the presentation, uh, I hope to discuss findings or from both articles and explain why I think these findings are important for families, psychologists, and educators. So before reading this article, I thought that I thought of stress mostly as something like emotional or psychological. So what stood out to me from Shonkoff was that the stress can actually affect physical development and long-term health. Him and the other authors, they describe positive stress, tolerable stress, and toxic stress. Um, what I found most interesting, though, is the difference is not always in the event itself. A lot depends on whether the child has supportive relationships to help them through the difficult situations. This idea connected with one of like the major themes I saw or kept seeing across both articles, that stress and adversity matter, but the supportive relationships matter too. So throughout the paper, uh, the authors they showed that children are not affected by experiences alone. Um, the people around them can influence how those experiences shape development. For me, that was one of the most important takeaways because it sets up the discussion of parenting and resilience uh, that we'll see later in my presentation. Something that stood out to me from these articles was that stress can literally shape the developing brain. Chronic activation of stress response, it affects our cortisol levels and it can influence areas of the brain involved in like memory, attention, learning, emotional regulation. This made me think about some of the concepts that we already discussed in class related to brain development. Um, Another thing that stood out to me from both articles is that early experiences matter, but they don't necessarily determine a person's future. So, as someone interested in mild traumatic brain injury, I'm super interested in like neuroplasticity because it suggests that the brain can continue adapting and changing throughout life. So, for me, uh, that's one of the most encouraging messages from reading this. Even when adversity creates challenges, supportive like relationships and good effective interventions could still create opportunities for growth and recovery. The article by Clayborne and colleagues, it examined like parental maternal stress and later child outcomes. What surprised me was how early developmental influences can begin. The researchers found that material that maternal stress during pregnancy was associated with both internalizing symptoms like anxiety and depression and externalizing symptoms such like attention and behavioral difficulties when the children reached age 8 years old. So one question while I had reading this article was whether the outcomes were already determined before birth. The findings suggested that they're not. Like parental stress may increase risk, but later experiences and relationships still matter. That was another encouraging part of the article for me because it suggests that even when children face challenges early in life, positive parenting and supportive environments can still influence developmental outcomes. This was probably the most interesting finding in the Clayborne article for me. Researchers found that parenting could either increase or decrease some of the effects associated with parental stress. Like inconsistent discipline tended to strengthen some negative outcomes, while positive parental involvement appeared to reduce some of those risks. So, what stood out to me is that this suggests that developmental outcomes are not fixed. Even when a child is exposed to risk factors early in life, parenting and supportive relationships can still make meaningful difference. It also, it also, I guess I wondered how can we get this information to parents? If research shows that involvement, consistency, and support can influence development, then educating parents may be one of the most effective interventions available. One thing these articles reminded me of, supportive relationships matter. Sometimes we underestimate how much simply showing up for a person, a child matters. In a lot of ways, it doesn't cost anything to be a good person, but that support may have a lasting impact on the child's life and development. Another question that I kept coming back to while reading these articles was whether resilience can actually be taught. Both articles show that adversity can affect development, but they also show that supportive relationships can reduce some of those effects. So this question stood out to me because of my experiences in the Marine Corps. One thing, some of the things the military tries to do is teach us how to adapt to adversity, manage stress, and continue functioning under difficult circumstances. Not everyone responds to challenges in the same way, but my experience suggests that at least some aspects of resilience can be strengthened through training, experience, and support from others. So, as future psychologists, these findings reinforce the importance of prevention and early intervention. So, I think psychologists should not only focus on treating problems after they occur, but also helping families, schools, and communities create environments that support healthy development. The common theme I see across both articles is that supportive relationships can help redirect developmental trajectories while the brain is still highly adaptable. So to conclude, both both articles reinforce the idea that development is shaped by interaction of biological, psychological, and environmental influences. First, stress can become biologically embedded and affect development in meaningful ways. Second, timing matters because early developmental periods are especially sensitive to environmental influences. Third, neuroplasticity provides hope because it means development remains adaptable rather than fixed. The findings also highlighted the importance of parenting and supportive relationships. Even when risk factors are present, positive environments can influence outcomes. The biggest lesson I took away from these readings is that adversity does not automatically determine a person's future. Through supportive relationships, early intervention, and effective prevention efforts, we can help create opportunities for growth, resilience, and positive development.